Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. My guest this week on Attendance Bias is the host of the Cinema Dave Media YouTube channel, Dave Burland. When Dave and I got in touch, two things stood out to me that immediately made me want to speak with him about Phish. First of all, he is a huge fan of The Who, and as you've all heard me mention several times on this podcast, I am too, so we have a lot of shared musical DNA. Second, he is a huge movie buff, and although I wouldn't go so far as to call myself an expert, I will say that after Phish and music in general, movies are my next biggest passion, so this seemed like a really natural fit. For today's episode, Dave picked July 30th, 2017, better known as the Jimmy's Night of the Baker's Dozen. In an earlier episode with author Jason Gershony, Jason and I went over Glazed Night, the final night of the run. But Jimmy's Night just seems to hit different. It was the same summer, same tour, same run, etc., but tonally, it was completely different than Glazed Night, and you'll hear Dave and I spend a lot of time talking about the details, the appeal, and the tone of the Baker's Dozen as a whole. So let's join Dave to hear about his Criterion Collection, Phish's version of Drowned, and the Baker's Dozen setlist predictions as we discuss July 30th, 2017 at Madison Square Garden, Jimmy's Night.
Let's meet today's guest.
Dave, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm really good, Brian. It's great to be on today. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Me too. And the more I've listened to today's show that you've chosen to speak about, that would be July 30th, 2017 at the Baker's Dozen, Jimmy's Night. The more I listen to it, the deeper it gets. But I rarely come back to this one, but I'm glad that you picked it because it kind of forced me to. So, but we'll get into that
Absolutely.
a little bit later. A little bit about you. You grew up in Massachusetts. You currently live in New York. And before we get into music, let's talk a little bit about movies. You have a YouTube channel called Cinema Dave Media.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
So I've loved movies all my life, and this is a channel where I just talk about my movie collection. And I have a big Criterion Collection. So these are kind of special international movies in many cases. And so that's kind of how it all started. And I really enjoy it. I watch a lot of movies too. So other than listening to Phish, that's what I do.
Sounds like my whole life, basically. I think you just described everything since high school.
That's
that
right.
I've gone through. What if someone was going to visit your YouTube channel, what's one or two episodes that you're particularly proud of? And what movies are they about?
Right. So one of the things is there's a big Criterion Collection sale going on right now. And so I think at Barnes & Noble, it's 50% off until August the 1st. So there's a lot of discussion about this particular sale. And so I have a video, a recent video from the past couple of days where I actually take a trip to Barnes & Noble near my area here in New York and pick up some titles there. And so I always get excited around this time of year because you can get some great deals. So that's probably one I would point people to. If you go to the channel, that would be great.
And have you ever done an episode about M, the Fritz Lang film?
M, I haven't, but that's another great film. You know, that's the funny thing about film too, is that you can watch a ton of films and you feel like you never are able to see them all, which I know I never will be, but you know, it's a great quest to be on for sure.
Which is like Phish.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's an accident that we are into those two things. And it's this idea that there's so much out there, like you just said, it's an impossible quest to fulfill, but that doesn't stop us from trying.
That's right. That's right.
So everyone at home, check out Cinema Dave Media on YouTube. I'm really excited because I'm I just said I wasn't a big film buff, but I like to think that I am. I'll call myself that. But I like being introduced to new movies that there's so much greatness out there that I have passed me by. So another part of your interests that you mentioned, other than film, let's talk a little bit about Phish. So how did Phish first enter your life?
You know, I have to say, we were talking a little bit before we started about some, you know, regrets. I grew up in Western Massachusetts and I went to school in Keene, New Hampshire. And I know Phish played there because I've listened to some of those shows. And of course, they started off in Vermont, which, you know, like I said, I was literally very close to where they were starting off. But I would have to say I really became a super fan in 2010. So I'm kind of late to the party a little bit. Not in the 1.0 era, you know, certainly, but I've listened to a lot of those shows. But I started to couch tour. I had collected some of the CDs and some of the DVDs, and I had started to couch tour. And the New Year's Eve show 2010 was when I really became a super fan. And I really became obsessed with the shows. And I think when we were talking before, there's a certain version of Ghost in that show that I was blown away by it. And so that's kind of how it all started for me. And I've really been a pretty obsessed, fan ever since.
Yeah, that famous Holy Ghost, right? It's come to be known as. That was my first New Year's show. I've been seeing Phish since '97, and I was never able to get tickets for the New Year's show. And I live in New York. I live really close to Madison Square Garden, so I had some opportunities. But I totally understand if there's a show that can bring in a new fan, between that Ghost that you mentioned, some other musical highlights, and of course the Meat Stick extravaganza.
Oh yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned in our conversation off mic that you were a casual listener until that New Year's show. What does that look like? Because I was all in. I was at 100 miles per hour right from the get-go.
I mean, like I said, I had a friend introduce me to the band. And so I was listening to a lot of other things. I've always listened to a lot of music in, my life in general. I had a few of the albums. I think I had a live one. I had that one. So I really enjoyed the version of Gumbo on that. So I would put that on once in a while and listen to that. I think in the beginning, if I'm being really honest, I was having a little issue with the vocals because which again is not even an issue for me anymore. It doesn't even bother me anymore, right? I just am, such a fan of the band. But I think a lot of new listeners, maybe I'm wrong here, but a lot of new listeners, I feel like maybe have issues with the vocals, but I really got into the improvisation element of it. I just love the fact that you can listen to a unique version of a song and hear that version. And I think that's what makes the Baker's Dozen so special too. And I know we'll get into that as well, but certainly my show, when I was re-listening to it, it's funny that we call this my show. That was my show. I feel like the one we're going to talk about.
Everyone has their show.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole point of this podcast. Everyone has their show.
Right.
So you mentioned that the New Year's 2010 was the first couch touring show that you watched. What was your first in-person show?
So my first in-person show was the 29th of July, 2017. Madison Square Garden. Yeah. The night before was my first show, which I absolutely love too. But I think I mentioned also in the notes that I've seen over 100, shows just on couch tours. Sometimes just my life, I wasn't able to really get on the road and, go to as many live shows, but I was completely blown away too that night. That was Cinnamon Night. And my wife and I went and we just had a really great time. We flew in from the Rochester area where we live and we went to a Broadway show first and then went right over to Madison Square Garden to see Phish. And absolutely blown away. We were so excited. The Blaze On and at the beginning of set 2 is amazing. I mean, there's so many great, things about that show even. But we were pretty high up for that show. I mean, we were high up sort of in the rafters, I think like parallel to the stage. So we maybe didn't have as good seats as we did for the second night. But again, just an amazing show too.
In addition to the music, what did you feel about the in-person vibe at your first show at Cinnamon Night? Do you remember?
I mean, anybody that's been to a Phish show, I feel like it's such a supportive, positive environment. That's the way I experienced it. Okay. I know maybe not everyone has the same experience, but I just feel like the music to me anyway is so positive, so energetic, so upbeat that I just had a blast. I really had a great time. So, I mean, that's what it was for me. Everybody's very polite too. I mean, I talked to people in line and I mean, this is, the first time, I think this is probably the first time I'd been to a Madison Square Garden show too. I'd seen a lot of shows. I lived in Los Angeles for many years and have been to a ton of shows, but this is the first time I'd been to the Big Cave, as they call it, right? And so, I thought everyone was really friendly. I really enjoyed it.
When was this show played?
So let's dig into the Baker's Dozen a little bit and the context of Jimmy's Night that you picked. Jimmy's Night was the 8th night of the Baker's Dozen. It was just past the halfway point. And by now, everyone knew what to expect at this point during the run. It was a big mystery leading up to it. I remember the questions beforehand was, are they going to play repeats? What are the themes going to be each night? And in their very fishy way, they slowly reveal details like jigsaw puzzle pieces until by around this night, we kind of knew what to expect, but at the same time, didn't. Madison Square Garden would be air conditioned. The Penzi was kind of the place to meet up beforehand. There were half-priced concessions at Madison Square Garden beginning at 6:30, which I will implore them to always do. You got to get in really early to get a donut. Did you get one?
I did not get a donut. Did you get one?
I only got one during the Lemon Poppy night. I went to 9 out of 13 shows, And the only one I got in early enough for was Lemon Poppy, which they played. Everything in Its Right Place by Radiohead was my most familiar memory from that night. But that was the only night I got in early enough. And then there were both predictable and unpredictable plays on each night's theme, which I want to talk about a little bit here. What were your expectations? Because the band on social media, about 15 minutes after each night ended, they would announce what the next show would be, the theme. Right. And instantaneously, message boards, Twitter, whatever would light up with ideas and crazy theories, the best kind of conspiracy theories, Phish. When you heard Jimmy, what was your impression?
I mean, I think we wanted the Harpua, right? I mean, that's the one, right? And that's the rarity, I feel like. And so in the beginning, I was very hopeful about it. And the second night I went with some friends of mine, Gary and Stacy, and then my wife, Jessie, again. And so we had all been talking about that we were hoping for the Harpua, but it's such a rarity. I think we've gone many tours without one. Right. I mean, you go years without seeing one. In fact, we haven't heard one since, right? I believe we haven't heard one since 2017. That's the last time I've heard a Harpua anyway. So
I think you're right. And on top of that, like I said, I've been seeing them since 1997. So that's plus, minus 6 months. That's 20 years. And I hadn't seen a Harpua in 100 plus shows. So this was the first one that I saw. And I agree with you. When I saw Jimmy's, like I have a ticket and thank God I do.
Again, I was hopeful for it. I mean, usually you hear a Harpua like at Dick's or something like that, or you know what I mean. At the end of like I remember one year that they played at the Sporting Goods Arena or whatever. But so that's what I was thinking. I mean, those are obviously Jimi Hendrix. I think I was thinking along those lines for maybe an Isabella, which it's funny. I was coming back home today and I heard an Isabella in the car and I was like, wow, it would have been great if they, and of course they did play that. They were playing the Baker's Dozen, version of that one. But he played it a few nights later, right? I think that was on the 4th of August, but
yes, that was at the very end of the run.
Yeah.
So there was plenty of Jimi Hendrix littered about, but an unexpected Jimi Hendrix song today, and we'll get to that encore.
Yep.
Some of my outside thoughts were Dr. Jimmy, which is a lesser known song off Quadrophenia, which they covered. And I thought, since they're digging so deep into their catalog, why not? They were playing everything, so why not? The Squirming Coil, I thought, for the line Little Jimmy's Off to Camp, which came through, but not in the way we expected. And pretty much any other Jimmy or Phish connections I could think of. So this was, you said, your second night of the Baker's Dozen. Were there just two that you saw?
Yeah. I would have loved to seen more. I don't know too. I think earlier this year, I started hearing some rumors maybe 2022, they might do another run like there, at Madison Square Garden. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's something I think would be interesting to get another run of that. I would definitely want to do a lot of nights.
Yeah, no, fingers crossed always for something like that.
Yeah. Or maybe even a half dozen, right? I think we go for a half dozen. Yeah, a 6-pack or something, right?
Fingers crossed, Phish. I know you're listening. Whoever's in Madison Square Garden, James Dolan, I know you're listening too. Figure it out.
Set 1.
So let's dig into the show. They open with the curtain with, which to me is always a good sign. Always, always, always. Whenever the curtain appears, especially this early in the show, I'm thrilled. I am obsessed with Page's organ part in the very beginning. I got obsessed with this song when I got the discs from Big Cypress back in early 2001 when I got them. And I always think it's a good sign. Something I noticed right away is that the tempo was a little bit slower than it normally is, than I expect, which is true in 3.0. But I wonder if it had something to do with how comfortable they were being at a residency.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about something there too, because keep in mind this was my second live show, so I had really good seats. I was on Page side, and I was pretty close to the the floor area, and even pretty close to the stage too. So I spent a lot of time watching the guys come out. I'd seen so many times on Couch Tour and different things, and I love watching Couch Tour too, just because of the you can get so up close with everything. And I was just absolutely mesmerized when the guys came out. It was so exciting. I can't even tell you. I'm sure you can relate with some of the early shows maybe that you saw or just another show. But for me, it was really exciting. And for them to open with the curtain width, I thought was great as well. And one of the things, I always like my curtain width, I have to say. I don't, I want to make sure that, there's that, the jam part at the end for sure. So.
And they follow that up with Runaway Jim, which when I was re-listening to this in preparation for this podcast episode, I thought to myself, why didn't I listen to this over and over again the minute after it happened?
Yeah,
this
right.
is an outstanding Runaway Jim.
Well, and it almost seems like a second set. There's sometimes when a first set seems like a second set. This could have been a Runaway Jim from a second set. As I was going through that, I was thinking this is like second set energy. That's what I was thinking.
It was. And to me at this point also, the Baker's Dozen afforded them such comfort and such ease where, they're on a regular tour, they're playing different venues every couple nights and they have to get used to the sound in the venue, usually that are very large. And by the time they get it nailed down, they're out.
Yeah.
Even on a 3-night run. For the Garden, for the Baker's Dozen, they knew exactly how it was going to sound pretty much every night, I think. So when they played this version of Runaway Jim, right after the song part is over, it occurred to me that the songs were little more than jam vehicles at this point. That I wouldn't call them formalities, but they were certainly springboards in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be, like maybe on the second song of a first set.
Yeah, I think also the other thing that really intrigued me about the Baker's Dozen too, just in general, since we're talking about that, is, Trey always talks about having, not really having a set list and just kind of going out, practicing all these songs and going out and just feeling what the crowd is feeling and trying to go off that. And I was thinking to myself, with this particular residency, there must have had to be some planning that went into it, right? Because, you can't incorporate some of these songs that relate to the donut without having some kind of planning too. But then, as you were saying, since they're so used to the venue and everything's been set up for a few nights, it really gives them a chance to improvise in a different way, maybe than they have, than they're not able to do if they're on the road, right? And of course, they're so used to Madison Square. Yeah, they're so used to Madison Square Garden too. So I thought it was a really good version of Runaway Jim. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Me too. Me too. Definite highlight. After Runaway Jim, they played 2 songs in a row that to me, it was all right, time for me to go to the bathroom and get a beer. No disrespect to either, but they were on opposite ends of the timeline for Phish. First was Waking Up Dead, Mike's song from Big Boat. And then they played Esther, which is one of the oldest of all Phish songs. And I feel kind of similarly about both. I wasn't that into Waking Up Dead. I like what Mike is going for, but I don't think he sings it with any authority. I don't think there's a lot of confidence behind the song, and it's weird in a good way. Mike's songs are always weird, but he doesn't pull it off with a lot of guidance or a lot of aplomb. Esther, I could go without it. It was the one song on Junta that I always skipped, but I know a lot of people out there do love it. What were you thinking at this point of the set?
I mean, I totally agree with you on Waking Up Dead. I think it's a good song, but Mike and I think the band even kind of struggle to pull it off. To me, it's like one of those kind of songs. I don't want to compare it to Sugar Shack or anything, but I feel like it's kind of one of those songs that they need to incorporate to try it out, to see how it goes, right?
I had this thought today when I was re-listening to the show. Maybe it's just a song, like you said, they have to play more and more to get that confidence. It just seems like they haven't cracked it open yet.
I would agree with that. And I think there's some songs we've seen over the years that they really do crack open, right? And start to really, use as as a jam vehicle.
Look at Ruby Waves, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ruby Wave. Isn't today the anniversary too of the?
Yes.
I thought it was it the Deer Creek one, or is it the?
Oh, is it? Yes, it's the 14th, right? We're recording on July 14th.
Yeah.
And what about Esther?
So Esther, I think I've grown to really enjoy more over the years. I was in the beginning of the first set. I'm looking at Kuroda's lighting rig. I'm looking, I'm just really enjoying the environment, the atmosphere, listening to them live, which they really sounded crisp live in that room. I have to say, I mean, it's such a big room for sure, but I think I've grown to like Esther a little bit more with the Beacon jams and working with Jeff Tansky and the Rescue Squad and everything like that. I really enjoyed those versions, kind of the stripped down versions of Esther, which is a hard song to play. I mean, I'm a guitar player too, and that's a crazy hard song to play. And so I think I appreciate that. And, this is again, something I think about often too. I wonder if Trey has a prompter in front. I'm pretty sure he does for the lyrics, even though sometimes he forgets the lyrics. But I think for that one, there's so many lyrics. I mean, come on, it's crazy.
After Esther, this is fun because this is in my mind, this is the flip side of Waking Up Dead. They played Home, which is another song off Big Boat. It is not led by Trey. It's Page's song.
Yeah.
And I like it. I like it better than a lot of the other songs that are on that album. I remember that it was the promo clip when the band first announced the release of the album. It takes about 5 minutes for it to really get started. I think I listened to a lot of Page's songs and his lyrics, through the lens of his divorce. I feel like a lot of his songs are about splitting up or taking something for granted, perhaps, or for assuming you have something. And then when you snap to it, it's not there anymore, getting used to one life and then realizing you have a whole nother life waiting for you. That's my personal lens. I could be way off if I sat down and spoke to Page about it. So a lot of this is like storytelling and personal feelings. A lot of his songs involve. And then after 5 minutes, musically speaking, they're rocking really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's new information to me. I guess I didn't know that Page was divorced, but interesting. Any conversation I have about Phish or even on Twitter, if I go back and forth, I'm always learning new things, which I think that's another great thing about the band. I feel like anytime you talk about the band, anytime you hear a show or you learn, I'm always hearing new teases and songs and things like that. Even if I've listened to the show over and over again, I go, that's a tease of this, But I totally agree. This one is a better track. Page obviously is very confident, singing, and they really, they jam, right?
And I had this thought. This is the only way I could think to express it is this sounds like the Baker's Dozen to me. There was like you mentioned it earlier, you hinted at it at least, that there was a very particular sound in the room over the course of this run that is not duplicated pretty much anywhere else, even at other shows at Madison Square Garden.
And also, I think Trey was playing with some new toys, right? I mean, I feel like even the show you mentioned with everything in its right place, he was definitely experimenting there with I saw him even on the shows that I couch toured, kind of going over to this new panel, and people started talking about that too. So I think the residency gave them time to experiment with all these new toys, right? Mm-hmm. So we got a different sound. Yeah, we got a different sound, and we got some. It was interesting for them, so it was interesting for the audience too.
After Home, they needed a cool down, and they played Brian and Robert, which I love this song. I think it's one of the few songs that the album version supersedes almost any live version. I think it's one of their most beautiful recordings.
I would agree. I love it.
And one thing that I noticed, I remember noticing this in real time, that instead of Fishman's cymbal work that provides the rhythm or the drum beat, so to speak, for this one, it was kind of more of a straightforward 4/4 Jackson Browne sort of solo. Did you notice that? Was it only me?
I mean, it sounds. Like I said, I recently re-listened to the show too, but I didn't really notice that. But that's a good catch, though, for sure.
If you get the time, listen back to the stereo. Listen to me. Listen to the album version, and then listen to this version again. I'm a drummer, and Brian and Robert's one of my favorite songs. So at first, I wasn't sure if I liked it, but like you, the more I listen to it, the more I enjoy it.
I love it, and I've heard Trey play it solo acoustic. I've seen Trey twice now solo acoustic, not with the Rescue Squad or anything like that. But yeah, I just love that song. It's such a poignant song. I love the lyrics. I absolutely love the lyrics.
I do too. And when they nail those background vocals, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Next up was Nellie Kane, which I thought was typical, good Phish bluegrass, good transition from the slow down song into the next big time capital letters, Forbins into Mockingbird, which is another huge rarity.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Harpua before. We'll do it again, but this is right on par with it. Were you as well versed in the band's mythology and the rarity aspect of like that kind of side of things by the time you got to this show?
Absolutely. I was totally in the Gamehenge by the time I got to the show, and I was like, it was great to hear these kind of songs live. I mean, so I really enjoyed that whole, sequence up until the end of the set too. And I thought it was great to hear, you've got Curtain With, and then you've got a Mockingbird and a Colonel Forbins in the same show. I mean, you just can't go wrong, right? I mean, what a show already.
And some people would add Esther onto that.
Esther too. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Let alone in the same set.
Right. In the same set. I mean, I think, as Phish fans, I think we're hoping for I'm at some point, I should say, this is kind of a side note, but I'm hoping for some kind of Phish musical at some point in the career here, because I feel like Gamehenge would be perfect for a Phish musical or at least a show that's all Gamehenge at some point. Right.
Yeah.
I know we've seen before, but not in recent years.
Right. Yeah. No, we've, with other guests, I've talked about Gamehenge quite a bit, most recently with, Jeff Goldberg, who is associated with Phish.net, and he picked a show July 8th, 94, which I think was their last performance of Gamehenge to date. I don't know how I would feel about a Gamehenge musical, but it would need a lot of blanks filled in for it to work. But yeah, the music is just so delightful.
Yep, I agree.
So in Forbin's Mockingbird, there's not really a narration. I mean, there is a mini narration where Trey, and this is where the Squirming Coil comes in, for Little Jimmy's Off to Camp, which doesn't make any sense when you sit down and listen to it, but man, is it fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's super fun. Mockingbird is a little off. Can't blame him though. Oh, wait, before we finish off Mockingbird, it blew my mind that in the middle of that little Colonel Forbin's narration that he quoted Glass Onion by the Beatles. The walrus was Paul. He said the walrus was Jimmy. Did you catch that?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And they played I Am the Walrus the night before too.
The words of the Helping Friendly book are powerful, but you don't need many of them. For lo, it is written, lo, Jimmy holds the Tanis root, the forest tasting nectar shoot. The sun tips off the monarch suit from sequin stash to shiny boot. And here's another clue for you all. The monarch was Wilson. And here's another clue for you all. The walrus was Jimmy!
That was closing of set one on the 29th.
That's it. That's the connection, because when I've listened that night, it didn't make any sense to me. And even if I've listened back, I know they've covered the White Album, but I thought, all right, I guess they're kind of doing a sideways nod to that, but you're right. You always learn.
Yeah, exactly.
And to close the set, they started David Bowie,
Right.
which I haven't loved so much in 3.0 compared to previous versions, but this one nailed it. It was perfect for the spot.
Yeah, I thought it was a great version of it. And again, so amazing to see live. I've heard so many versions of the song, but it really gave the guys a chance to improvise. And again, keep in mind, I'm still sort of glowing from seeing, a set one that was so amazing. So really, really good. I mean, like I said, complete excitement, wishing I had, gotten tickets for more nights, I have to say at that point.
So yeah, you came in from Rochester. Was this part of a vacation, or was it just a special thing that you and your wife said, let's hit these 2 shows and then go back home?
It's really funny because I did the lottery for the 7:30 show, the one we're talking about. And then my wife and I were going to go see a Broadway play when we went in, and we said, let's just look for other, because we can't be in town and know Phish is playing and not go to the show. So we had tickets to a Broadway show, and then we said, let's look on StubHub and see if we can get tickets. And that's how we got the tickets to the 29th. And we're like, oh, this is great. And again, we were going from the cab to the Broadway show to Madison Square Garden. So by the end of the night on the 29th, we were really exhausted.
I bet. And if you were on Broadway, it was just 10 blocks away.
Yeah, exactly right. So we ran. I mean, we just got like a bottle of water at one of the stands on the corner, and then we went into the show.
Set 2.
All right, breaking into set 2. This is one of my favorite covers that they play because I'm a huge fan of The Who. I know you mentioned in your notes that you are as well.
Absolutely.
They open with Drowned, and man, opening the second set with it drives me crazy in the best way possible.
Insane. I mean, like I said, my friend Gary was with me, and he and I both saw The Who. In fact, we saw The Who at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, wow.
And it was the show that was canceled, and because Entwistle had passed away, and so they got Pino Palladino to stand in, and so it was the first show back for them, but they played a rockin' show that night. But anyway, we were really excited. I mean, I just looked at my friend Gary and said, this is heaven sent. I mean, this is amazing. I couldn't believe it.
I felt the same way I think it was 1999 was the first time I saw Phish play Drowned, at least. They opened it in Hartford. I think the date is December 12th, 99. And they opened the second set, and it's like a 30-minute long ambient. Now, I won't even say roller coaster because there's not crazy peaks. It's just kind of in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I went nuts. I probably felt the same exact way you did here. And there's some parts of this version of Drowned, especially at around 3 minutes that early in, that you can prove it. That Page is just owning this and really hammering that keyboard.
Yeah, I mean, it pays to play the song over and over again for so many years. I mean, they really nailed it. I was so impressed. And again, this is the part, I don't know where you were, but I was really mesmerized by the lighting rig, I have to say. I was watching the, Kuroda sort of in the back and also the rig that was amazing for Madison Square Garden too. So I'm just watching that part too. At the beginning of set 2, I'm watching that rig move around. I don't know if it's a special one, if he's always had that one, I don't know, but I felt like I was up close to it.
I don't know if that was the first time he used it. Maybe that summer 2017 tour, right? They had like 3 or 4 shows before.
Yeah.
That might have been their first, but I want to stick on this Drowned for a little bit.
Sure.
What it did for me at the time, and again, listening to it this week, is The Baker's Dozen became its own event in itself. And the fact that we realized by this point, 8 shows in, that they weren't going to repeat any songs, it made us realize that, okay, this is the Baker's Dozen Drowned. This is the Baker's Dozen Colonel Forbins. Everything had that precursor to it. It was the only one we were going to hear in 13 shows, which is pretty rare for a tour. And this Baker's Dozen Drowned was really a high point of the whole run, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know we talked about it earlier, but sort of the set list Jenga, if you will, just kind of moving the pieces around and everything like that. Like I said, there had to be more planning going into this to say, this is our only version of this. And so they have an opportunity to really take it to a new level. It's a special show for me. I mean, I know I said that at the beginning, but it's a really special show for me. And when, my wife and I listen to it, we have so many memories. We feel like we're there, still. And this is, like I said, the beginning of the special set.
Why did you pick this show to come on and speak about as opposed to the Cinnamon Night?
You know what? I had really good seats and I love Harpua. So, yeah. So,
well, it's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah. I know we'll get to it. I mean, it's not like we spoiled anything, but I'm saying that seeing the Harpua was so special, but I know we'll get to it. So,
yeah, of course. And, we don't want to rush it. During Drowned, I just want to stick on it because I'm so in love with it that there's really ethereal, what I like to call planetarium Phish at around 14 minutes, because I just picture myself in one of those cushy, comfortable seats looking up at Hayden's planetarium.
Right.
In 16 minutes, it gets quite a bit darker. It reminds me of their 2.0 tone a little bit. Phish is using their entire history to still invent new music on the spot. It's like they have access to a gigantic control panel where each button and flip switch is a different part of their catalog style and tricks over the last, what was it at the time, maybe 30 something years.
Yeah. And, this is what's made me so obsessed with the band, I think, for the last 11 years, because just looking at the analytics and just analyzing everything, all these different versions. And then you realize that something like this is just such a special version because of the room that they're in, because of the toys that they have to play with. And it's so funny that you mentioned also this aquarium idea, because I think the next song is a song I heard the ocean sing. I think that's the next one, right?
Yes.
And so it just kind of clicked with me because, and not to move off the Drowned at all, but
go for it.
But I feel like that song for me, and they put that particular version on their YouTube channel too. So I've watched that video over and over again. That to me really stuck out in the second set. As much as I love Drowned, I felt like I was in a different place during that version of a song I heard the ocean sing. And it's not even a song that I particularly like that much. I can't really even say it's a favorite, but I feel like the jamming in that one, I think it's an over 20-minute version of it. I could be wrong there, but that one blew me away, totally blew me away. So by the time they got into that, I looked around at my friends too, and I'm like, is this, you have like one of those Lawn Boy moments, right? Is this still Lawn Boy? I was thinking that, like, what song is this? Are we even in the second set? I was completely gone at that point, just totally enjoying the show.
I have a very similar outlook on the song I Heard the Ocean Sing as you do. I remember at the time, I thought that this was the best version I heard. I thought at the time, live in person, and my previous one was Brooklyn 2004. And the vibe there was not so hot. It was, first of all, it was raining like crazy. But second, they had just announced a little less than a month prior that they're breaking up. And this is the last tour. And so a lot of those songs that came out around that time that are on the Undermined album, I was not that interested in. I didn't want to get attached to them because as far as I knew, I would never hear them played live again. So, let's fast forward through this song I Heard the Ocean Sing and get to the good stuff. Like they played The Curtain, stuff like that. But looking back, it's a good version, but I still think this one is the best I've heard.
Is that the 2004? Was that captured on the Live in Brooklyn? Is that the one that's on live? Because I've watched that one too. And I would agree with you. It was not as good as this one.
Yeah, I thought this one, the sound was so much more balanced. We've talked about the sound a lot, but it's impossible not to.
And also, the thing I remember about it, and you'll see this in the video if you watch it on YouTube, punching of those lights, the red lights in the back. You know how they had like the I don't know if it's like a police light in the back or something like that. I don't know what they call it, but there's red lights in the back that kind of punch the drums at that particular point in the song. And I remember that specifically about the lighting during that song. Really, really amazing to see live.
It's funny that you keep making reference to the lighting. I remember almost nothing about the lights from anything in this whole run. The only thing I remember is the last night of the whole thing when they were putting the spotlight on the banner that they raised to the rafters. Yeah. Otherwise, it was just a big glump.
What's funny, if I could mention one other thing here too. Yeah. Really funny that you were talking about 2004 and kind of when the band was breaking up and then when they got back together. I've had this thing happen to me where I really get into a band and then they break up. So keep in mind, when I first started listening to Phish was around the time when they got back together again, which made it very special for me because during the time that they were not together and things were happening, I was listening more to their music, maybe not as regularly as, couch touring every week, but to have a band get back together was super exciting for me.
I also have a habit of getting into bands and artists before they break up. Unfortunately, before they die. I got deep into Warren Zevon right before he left this earth. Big Star was another big power pop band that I loved. And they, again, their lead singer died as well. So it's pretty much the music equivalent of getting the jersey of your favorite baseball player minutes before he's traded.
Right, exactly.
To end a song I Heard the Ocean Sing, like you mentioned, you felt like you were in a completely other place. They keep pushing it farther and farther out into kind of new territory to explore, like a European explorer. By around 14 minutes, Fishman is playing this weird like marching band drum beat. I don't know if you know the part I'm talking about.
And the
rest of the band is like early Pink Floyd territory. It's really this confluence and mixture and combination of weird different styles that still somehow holds together.
Yeah.
Really impressive. And finally, the big time, they break out Harpua.
Yeah.
I'll save my piece. This is the reason you picked it. What was happening to you?
I mean, oh man. I mean, I heard the opening chords of that. I knew exactly what it was. Of course, we were hoping for it, right? So it's not like it was that much of a mystery. But I was like, oh my! I was like, am I really here to see this? Because I knew how much of a rarity it was. I love when the guys talk. I mean, I have to say, I like when they kind of take a break and are funny and are kind of goofing around. I have to say, I like a lot of I like shows with some shenanigans. Okay,
Me too.
so if it's just kind of a straight show and there's some great jamming, that's great. But I love when they just laugh and have a good time and are kind of joking with each other, or Fishman does something silly or whatever. And so I thought, wow, this is going to be great. And and they had the chairs and the newspapers and everything like that. I was taking pictures and really just amazed with the whole thing. And I knew the crowd was going to, because we were primed for it already. After those first two songs, we were like, oh man, this is going to be great. And so, just when they're sitting down and I try to think, I'm also thinking when I'm in the shows, when I listen to them back about, how did they plan this? Did they rehearse this? Is this happening? I mean, I think I was thinking about it too, when they did the New Year's Eve show when Trey got stuck on the platform. I was thinking, because a lot of people are saying, is this a gag? We know that it wasn't a gag, but I'm often wondering, are they really reading those newspapers? Is this a script? Are they making it up as they go along? That kind of thing. So I was thinking that as they started reading through it. Obviously the universe is a donut. I still believe that, but
oh yeah, you signed on to. I don't even understand it.
I signed on to it. Whatever they say, I'm with it.
Well, yeah, I'll sign on to that then.
Yeah.
But I know that the script did come from a New York Times article that was about metaphysics, and it was someone arguing that due to some sort, again, I don't understand it. So any metaphysicians out there, any scientists out there, you could yell at me all you want because I deserve it. But it's something like due to certain observations that you could make and theories about space and the way that the universe is organized, that it's kind of this cylindrical, cylindrical shape that kind of expands and contracts. So the closest comparison would be that it's a donut. So
a donut, yeah.
I think what they did was they, like you mentioned, they all had the newspapers opened. I think that copies of those articles were cut out, copied, pasted with different band members highlighted, depending on when it was their turn to speak.
When they're going, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like Phish, like any joke with Phish, they got to do it well past the punchline hits.
Yeah.
They're already like 6 minutes in before it says, more like a donut.
The remaining large-scale variations form a line across the sky.
Wait. So, if the universe is finite in one dimension, meaning it's like a cylinder, or...
Yep. Or, like...
a donut.
Wow, Phish, that's right. It's definitely a donut. There's a limit to the size of clumps that can fit in that direction, and they couldn't be bigger than the universe in that direction, so it has to be a donut.
A guitar string can only play a note solo, depending on its length. So, the biggest blobs would have to squish out in a plane in other directions. The way home around the donut would...
It's like they're already 6 minutes into the gag.
Yeah. I just love the interplay. I mean, it was so entertaining. It was just amazing to see that. And then again, as I said, you have to realize as a Phish fan how special it is to see a rarity like that, because some people go 10 years, longer than that, maybe even without even seeing a song like, depending on the tickets that you get or where you see the band, et cetera. So it's, still, my top show, I have to say.
For good reason.
Yeah.
And after Harpua, finishes, they go right into 2001. And at this point, it's a murderer's row of a set list. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
And even if you don't like all the songs, like I mentioned, a song I heard the Ocean sing isn't, if I had to make a list of 10 dream songs in a set list, it probably wouldn't be included, but the way they played would be.
Yeah.
So considering that, it's an outstanding set. Going into 2001, which is an instant dance party, there was immediate transition from Harpua into this. I remember the whole mood of the place just switched instantly from being goofy, laughing, can you believe they're doing this? What is happening? This is funny, to, all right, let's get down.
And 2001 also was one of my favorites, just listening to, the listening I was doing before I became an obsessed, fan. So it was, great to hear that live as well. Right. And they really, it's funny because I was listening to I can't remember the year, but I was listening to another version of 2001 where Trey started playing, the main theme very early on. And I feel like in this one, maybe this is true for 3-0, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they really teased that opening. They really teased that quite a bit. You really think he's going to go into it, and then they just kind of go back down again, and he doesn't do it. But there are other versions where he goes right into the theme right away and plays it over and over again.
When it was very early, when it debuted, I think it was in 1993, it was like a 3.5 minute performance that they would just start the drum beat, go right into the chorus, I think do 2 or 3 rounds, and then they were moving on to the next song. And then around 97-ish, I think they started really expanding and seeing the potential of it to jam on it and just kind of vamp and go wherever they want. I agree with you on this one. And this goes all the way back to our discussion about the Curtain, that their tempo was a little bit slower and they were a little bit more comfortable. They could spread their wings. And this 2001 really benefits. I love that Page uses his synthesizer during this. He's gotten a lot more comfortable with it. And I think it benefits the whole thing. Perfect palate cleanser.
Absolutely.
After Harpua.
Absolutely.
And to close the whole set, there's kind of a back-to-back 2 closers, I would argue. Golgi Apparatus, which is, I think, standard great. And then this new, and I don't think it's been played since, I could be wrong on that, but a new a cappella tune in the good old summertime.
Yeah, that was fun too. One thing I'll say about Golgi Apparatus, that I love that song. So for me, seeing it, I just was singing at the top of my lungs, the chorus on that one. And I remember hugging my friend Gary, which I don't even know why I did it, but I was so excited to see that song that I turned around, I gave him a hug. I'm like, I can't believe I'm singing this live, So I know you said it was kind of a standard version. For me, I was super excited and I remember losing my voice because I sang so loud the chorus on that one.
That's fabulous. Yeah. It's a classic. It's everyone's favorite at some point.
Yeah.
They played it at my first show and I felt the same exact way that you did. I can't believe I'm hearing it. I know this one is what I remember. I remember saying. So it was standard, but standard great because it's Phish.
Yep.
In the good old summertime, I didn't realize until I just listened to it again the last time before we started recording. This is a very demanding song, especially a Fishman. Yep. I can't imagine how exhausted he is after 2 sets of music, and now he's got to really stretch himself.
And he's got to sing. Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I love the acapella, right? I mean, I think the acapella versions are so special to see. So, I mean, what a way to close out the night. I mean, I was happy at the end of set 1, I have to say. So this was everything after set 1 was extra for me. I was just like, this is great. So.
And the encore lived up to the theme of the night. They could have played any Jimi Hendrix song, like you mentioned earlier. They play Fire. That's part of their rotation. They could have played any other Jimi Hendrix song, but leave it to Phish to debut a new Jimi Hendrix song after they've already covered like 6 of them already. Yeah. What were your thoughts on their version of The Wind Cries Mary?
I thought it was really good, and I don't think they've played it since, have they? I could be wrong.
No,
we may have to fact check that. It's the only time it's the debut. So again, you're getting something special in the encore that I thought was, amazing. I had seen Cinnamon Girl the night before too. Mm-hmm. So, and I know maybe they had played that before too, but I
think they played it once. It might have been in the summer of '98, but I'll have to check that.
Yeah. I mean, it was great to hear that. And we were sort of expecting that it might be Cinnamon Girl the night before too. Yeah. So, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
I loved it too. And with The Wind Cries Mary, it's a lot more sedate than a lot of other Jimi Hendrix songs as a ballad. And this is the sort of song that I feel a lot of friends, when they're forming a band in high school, might learn. to play in their basement. And it's a lot tougher to play than you might think. Maybe not learning the chords or the drum parts, but learning how to play it. Nailing the tone of this song is not easy.
Yeah.
And Phish pulled it off.
Yeah, really, really special at the end of the night. Absolutely.
So overall, Dave, what is your impression of Jimmy's Night? I think we kind of know, but if you had to sum it up.
Absolutely amazing. And I just one thought I had too is I remember walking out with the crowd at the end and how excited everyone was. And I got the same kind of friendly vibe that I got going in. And so I think for me, Phish is such a special band. I mean, I have to say, there was a time that I think I'm still even thinking about this, where I was ready to get rid of all the other CDs I have and just listen to Phish for the rest of my life. I don't know if that's realistic, and I am listening to other music, now, but I just feel that they're so special. They're so referential to other things. I mean, people have called them, the best cover band in the world too, right? I mean, they, so if I hear a version of a song like Drowned or The Wind Cries Mary, I would want to hear their version of it, right? I look forward to Halloween all the time because I want to hear what they're going to play. So this was a really special time for me. It was special for my wife and I, and my friends, and it's really funny because this summer we're after the pandemic and everything. I mean, I know things are still going on, but we randomly decided to get together in a couple of weeks, and we're getting together on the anniversary of the show. We didn't even realize we were doing that. The same 4 people. So we talk about the show often. We have, we got magnets for the show that are on our fridge. My wife and I talk about Phish every single day, so
secrets to a happy marriage.
Yeah. So anyway, this was a really special show for me with a special group of people, not only my friends, but also the entire audience.
And before we cut out of here, Dave, can you give us one more reminder about your YouTube channel and how people can find it?
So I have a channel on YouTube called Cinema Dave Media, where I talk about movies, international films, all types of films. I have a collection of Criterion Blu-rays. I think that's probably my what I cherish the most. So I absolutely love, along with my love of Phish, I love also films. So if you want to hear about new films or see haul videos, that's where I do that on YouTube. So.
All right, Dave Burland, thank you again so much for joining us today on Attendance Bias.
Thanks so much to you, Brian. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking with you.
And that's it for today's episode, my interview with Dave Burland about Jimmy's Night. As you all know, at the end of every episode, we have to do an attendance bias fact check because we threw a lot of guesses out there today. And man, this fact check took me quite a while to put together. But just the same, I'm quite proud of it. So please enjoy today's attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
First, Dave mentioned that he grew up near Keene, New Hampshire. He brought this up because he regrets not getting into Phish sooner because they used to play there. The main venue that Phish played in Keene was the Colonial Theater, which is still there and has a capacity of 1,304 seats. According to Phish.net, the band played there 7 times between the May of 1990 and March of 1992. When discussing the anticipation of hearing Harpua during Jimmy's Night, Dave thought that this version of Harpua was the last one played to date, and he's right about that. This interview was recorded in mid-July 2021, so by the time it airs, Phish will be well into their 2021 summer tour, fingers crossed. So this, of course, may change, but as of today, July 30th, 2017 was the last time the band played Harpua. Also during the Harpua discussion, Dave mentioned that the band once played the song at Dick's. He's referring to September 6, 2015, when the band played Harpua during the outstanding Thank You Encore. Harpua was the H of the Thank You acronym. During our discussion about Waking Up Dead, our conversation drifted over to Ruby Waves. Dave mistakenly said that the date of our recording, June 14th, 2021, was the anniversary of the Deer Creek version of Ruby Waves that was famously jammed out. He is referring to the performance of Ruby Waves from July 14th, 2019 at Alpine Valley, not Deer Creek. During our chat about a song I heard the ocean sing, Dave guessed that it's a 20-minute version of the song at Jimmy's Night. He's close, but off by just a little bit. According to Phish.in, this version is 18 minutes and 1 second. Again, in our discussion about Harpua, I said that the script for the song's narration was from a New York Times article. The article is titled, quote, Universe as Donut, New Data, New Debate. It was written by Dennis Overby, and it was published in the New York Times on March 11th, 2003. And quickly, during our discussion of 2001, Dave said that earlier versions of the song dive into the chorus very quickly. When he asked me about that, I mentioned that 2001 debuted in 1993, and the earliest versions were about 3 minutes long. For the record, the first time Phish played 2001 was on July 16, 1993, at the Mann Music Center in Philadelphia. That debut was 4 minutes and 3 seconds. And finally, a correction. I said that the band had played Cinnamon Girl once before Cinnamon Night, possibly in the summer of 1998, but I was wrong on both counts. They played it twice before, both times in 1997. Cinnamon Girl debuted on March 18, 1997 at the Flynn Theater in Burlington, Vermont, and they played it a second time on July 31, 1997 at the Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View, California. And that's it for today's episode of Attendance Bias. I have to thank Dave Burland for joining me today, Phish.net for really helping out with today's extensive fact check, and Phish.in, Fishin', for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by leaving a rating and a review on your favorite podcast app. You can also find Attendance Bias on social media, specifically Instagram and Twitter. If you reach out, I'll send you a free sticker. And of course, thank you so much again for listening, and I'll see you next week on Attendance Bias.